Have you ever wondered how that bite of food you just took is going to power your next thought, your next step, or even your very next breath? Well, today, we're going to trace that exact journey. We're going to uncover how your body transforms a simple meal into the literal fuel for life itself.
You know, it all starts with the basics, right? Bread, fruit, pasta, all the carbohydrates that are really the #1 fuel for our cells. But how does something like a potato become the power for your workout? The answer, it turns out, is this stunningly elegant series of chemical reactions.
To really get this, let's just forget about biology for a second and think about economics. Yeah, economics. Imagine there's this bustling little economy happening inside every single one of your cells, where the currency isn't money, but energy.
So the official name for this whole energy economy is metabolism, and it is so much more than just burning calories. It's this grand, coordinated sum of every single chemical reaction that keeps you alive, from breaking down food to building the very cells that you're made of. This cellular economy basically has two main things going on. On one side, you've got catabolism. Think of this as the income department. It's breaking down big molecules from your food to release energy. And on the other side, you've got anabolism. That's the construction department, spending that energy to build everything your body needs. It's this perfect, constant cycle of earning and spending. So what's the actual currency in this whole economy? Well, meet the undisputed star of the show, a molecule called adenosine triphosphate, or as we all know it, ATP. This is the universal energy dollar that every single one of your trillions of cells uses to get work done.
Okay, and this is where it gets really clever. The best way to think of ATP is like a rechargeable battery. When catabolism breaks down food, it's like plugging that battery into a charger. It takes a low-energy molecule, ADP, slaps another phosphate group on it, and boom, you have a fully charged ATP battery. Then when a cell needs to do some work, it just pops that phosphate off, releasing all that stored energy. It's this endlessly repeating cycle of charging up and powering down.
Okay, so we have our currency, ATP. But where does the income to actually create that ATP come from? Let's meet our primary source, a simple sugar molecule called glucose, which is the main thing we get from breaking down the carbohydrates we eat.
Now, before our cells can do anything with glucose, they have to get it inside. It can't just wander in. There are these specialized proteins on the cell surface that act like really picky revolving doors. They grab a glucose molecule from your bloodstream and pull it right into the cell. The second that glucose gets inside, the cell plays this brilliant little trick to make sure it can't leave. It immediately attaches a phosphate molecule to it. Now, this not only gets the glucose ready for the energy-making process, but it also changes its shape, effectively trapping it inside. The revolving door it just came through doesn't even recognize it anymore, so there's no escape. Pretty smart, huh?
All right, so our glucose is now trapped inside the cell. It's at a crossroads, and the cell has to make a decision. What are we going to do with this thing, based on what we need right now?
The cell's got a few options here. It could use the glucose as a building block for other stuff, it could store it away for later, or, if there's a huge surplus, it can even get converted into fat. But for our story today, we're going to follow the most immediate and, let's be honest, the most exciting path, turning it directly into energy.
And that brings us to the main event. This is the multi-stage process of cellular respiration, where the cell is finally going to cash in that glucose molecule for a whole bunch of ATP. The first stage of this whole thing happens right where the glucose is, floating around in the fluid-filled cytoplasm of the cell. This first set of reactions is called glycolysis, which literally means sugar splitting.
And sugar splitting is exactly what happens. That one 6-carbon glucose molecule gets snapped cleanly in half, and what you're left with are two smaller 3-carbon molecules called pyruvate. What's cool is this first step doesn't even need oxygen, and it gives us a small but really crucial first bit of energy.
So, what's the initial payout from this first step? A net gain of just 2 molecules of ATP. I mean, it's a start, but it's barely enough to keep a cell going for long. The real energy jackpot is still locked away inside those 2 pyruvate molecules.
And this brings us to a huge crossroads. The fate of that pyruvate depends entirely on one thing. Is there any oxygen around? If there's no oxygen, it goes through a pretty low-yield process. But if oxygen is present, well, then it gets an exclusive invitation to a much more profitable event inside the cell's powerhouse. So, with oxygen on the scene, our pyruvate molecules are escorted into a very special place in the cell, the mitochondria. You've heard of it, right? The power plant of the cell. This is where the real energy production goes down.
Inside the mitochondria, that pyruvate is just completely dismantled in 2 main stages. First up in what's called the Krebs cycle, it gets broken down even more, releasing a flood of high-energy electrons. Then, those electrons get passed down something called the electron transport chain. You can think of it like a series of tiny waterfalls. And at each drop, their energy is used to generate a massive amount of ATP.
And what's the final payout from this whole high-tech process? A staggering 30 to 32 additional ATP molecules. I mean, just think about that. We only got 2 from that first step. This aerobic process, the one that uses oxygen, is what makes complex life like us possible. It is unbelievably efficient. But wait, what if the cell is just resting and doesn't need all that ATP right this second? Does it just waste all that glucose? No way. The body is incredibly good at storage.
If the cell's energy levels are already high, it doesn't just let that extra glucose go to waste. Instead, your liver and your muscle cells start linking those glucose molecules together into a long chain called glycogen. Think of this as stocking your body's pantry with quick energy snacks. This is the fuel you're going to tap into for a sudden sprint or a heavy lift at the gym. But what happens when that pantry is totally full? Well, then the body switches over to its ultimate long-term savings plan. The liver starts converting any leftover glucose into triglycerides, which then get shipped off to be stored in adipose tissue, what we all call body fat. This is really the body's way of saving energy for a rainy day, making sure you can survive for the long haul.
So let's just zoom out for a second and appreciate this entire journey. We've followed a single molecule of sugar all the way from our plate. We've seen it get broken down for a tiny profit, and then, with a little help from oxygen, we watched it unleash this massive energy windfall.
I mean, just look at the difference. It is staggering. The anaerobic process, just glycolysis by itself, gives you a net of 2 ATP. But the full aerobic journey through the mitochondria, that gets you up to 32 ATP from the exact same single molecule of glucose. That's a 16-fold increase in efficiency. It's literally the reason we breathe.
From a single meal to trillions of microscopic power plants that are fueling your every thought and your every action, it's just an extraordinary, elegant system. Understanding this whole process really gives you a profound appreciation for the fuel we choose to put in our bodies. So, knowing the incredible journey it takes, the question is, how will you choose to fuel your amazing engine?